My brother promised my 5-year-old he'd be the ring bearer. For a year, my son practiced with a pillow, pure joy, and tiny tuxedo sketches. Then we found out the wedding was child-free, and he wasn't invited. He packed a suitcase anyway, said he didn't want to be late. When I told him the truth, he cried so hard he fell asleep, holding the invitation he made. My husband said I was letting a kid's feelings ruin everything, so I stayed silent. I didn't fight, I didn't beg, but what I did after that, let's just say, they don't talk about the wedding anymore. The day my 5-year-old son found out he wasn't wanted at the wedding of the man he adored like a superhero was the day I realized my brother might never be family again. It was a realization that landed like a weight in my chest and has refused to leave since. I haven't told many people this story, not because it's scandalous or dangerous, or even particularly unique, but because it's the kind of thing that stings in a quiet way, like an old bruise you forget about until you press it by accident. My name is Ronan. I'm 31 years old. I live abroad with my husband and our 2 boys, Oren and Jules. We moved here 3 years ago for my husband's job, and though I had my doubts at first, I've grown to love our little corner of the world. It's not glamorous, just a modest apartment on the top floor of a building with creaky stairs and neighbors who nod but rarely speak. Still, there's something intimate about our life here, something stitched together with slow mornings and the sound of tiny feet running down the hall. Oren is 5 and full of questions. He's the kind of kid who wants to know how everything works, from the toaster to the stars. He's sensitive, too. Always watching, always listening. He takes things to heart in a way I sometimes forget children can. He loves puzzles, dinosaurs, and pretending to be the hero in every story. And when he loves, he does it with his whole being. Jules is just learning to talk. He babbles nonsense with such purpose that you'd swear he was delivering important speeches in some secret toddler language. He has this way of pulling his socks off, then throwing them across the room with the triumph of a soccer star scoring a goal. His laugh is loud and contagious. He's chaos wrapped in soft cheeks and sticky fingers. Life isn't always easy for us so far from home. We miss birthdays, the kind where everyone gathers around a lopsided cake and sings off-key. We miss Sunday dinners, crowded around a too small table with hands reaching over one another for seconds, and stories shared between mouthfuls. We miss the safety net of family just around the corner. The ease of dropping by someone's house on a whim or calling in help when one of the kids is sick and all you want is an hour of rest. Here, we are our own village. Every scrape, every tantrum, every fevered night. It's just us. We take turns being strong. We lean into the small joys, the way Jules giggles when Oren makes a silly face, or how my husband always remembers to make coffee just the way I like it. Even on the hard mornings, we've learned to find celebration in the everyday, a warm dinner that wasn't reheated 3 times, a load of laundry finished before midnight, 5 minutes of quiet on the balcony while the kids nap. Our mornings are quiet, filled with cereal bowls and cartoons in languages we're still learning to understand. Our evenings are loud and messy and full of toys we keep tripping over, and we laugh through it. Most days, there's arguing over bedtime, over which pajamas to wear, which story to read. There are timeouts and apologies and the kind of hugs that melt away everything else. It's imperfect, but it's ours. And somewhere in all of it, I found a version of happiness I never knew I was missing. It's a small life. Not the one I imagined when I was younger, not the one filled with constant adventure or glamorous travel, but it's a life held together by love and effort, and this fierce, unshakable devotion to our little unit. And I never knew I would crave this kind of beautiful chaos the way I do now. A little over a year ago, during a summer trip back home, my younger brother Merrick, 3 years older than me, ironically, made a promise to my son. It wasn't a big deal at the time, or maybe it should have been. I guess we never know what sticks with a kid. What made it special, what made it sacred in a way, was the bond between Merrick and Oren. Merrick had always had this easy charm with kids, but with Oren it was more than that. They clicked, maybe because they were both curious, both a little dramatic, both endlessly fascinated with how things work. Oren would light up when Merrick entered the room, like someone just turned on the sun. And Merrick, he indulged that love. He answered Oren's endless questions with made-up stories and exaggerated voices. He made up a secret handshake with him, taught him how to do shadow puppets on the wall, let him win races down the backyard path. So when Oren overheard us reminiscing about my wedding, us, adults, just joking and sipping cold drinks, sun slipping through the oak leaves like gold ribbons, and he scrunched up his little face and said, "Why didn't I get to go?" It wasn't just a question, it was a protest, a sincere feeling of being left out by people he trusted most. Everyone laughed, but Merrick didn't brush it off. He leaned over, tousled Oren's hair with this kind of brotherly gentleness I hadn't seen in years, and said, "Don't worry, bud. When I get married, you can be the ring bearer." Oren's face lit up. He nodded so hard I thought his neck might snap. That was it. The promise was made. But to Oren it wasn't just a casual agreement. It was a mission, a role, an honor. From that moment on it became part of his identity. He told his preschool teacher, the mailman, even strangers at the park, that he was going to be a ring bearer. Not just any ring bearer, Uncle Merrick's ring bearer. There was pride in his voice every time he said it, like he'd been entrusted with a sacred duty. And Merrick fed into that magic. He called Oren, his best man Junior, bought him a tiny toy bow tie during one of their outings, and even joked about making him a mini speech. The way they interacted made it feel less like uncle and nephew, and more like co-conspirators in some heartfelt plan. I remember watching them once. Merrick crouched beside Oren, explaining how to walk smooth and slow, like you're floating. Oren practiced for weeks. To me, that moment in the backyard felt like one of those unexpected blessings life sometimes gives, when you're not asking for anything. Watching the two of them, Oren with his open heart, Merrick with his playful charm, felt like watching something solid being built. Like maybe this exact connection was what being part of a family was really about. The promise wasn't about formality. It wasn't about wedding decorum or tradition. It was about being seen, about being included, about being told, you matter, you belong with us. And Merrick had said it with such ease, but Oren had taken it as gospel. And I think I had too. From that day on, Oren told anyone who would listen that he was going to be Uncle Merrick's ring bearer, not just in passing, not just once. It became his favorite subject. At school, he asked his teacher if they could practice walking in a line like at weddings. At home, he insisted on turning the hallway into a ceremony aisle and rehearsed several times a day with a pillow balanced carefully in his tiny arms. He practiced his smile in the mirror, the way his shoes sounded against the floor, how to hold his shoulders back and walk slow, steady, proud. He drew picture after picture, himself in a tuxedo, always beside Merrick, with big bold letters that read "Best Ring Bearer Ever." Some days he asked me to help him design invitations, complete with stickers and glitter. He once used a ruler to measure out a pretend stage in the living room, wanting everything to be just like a real wedding. He even asked if he should start learning how to bow. It was sweet. It was obsessive. And if I'm being honest, it was something I loved seeing. A little tether between my son and my brother. Something wholesome and easy. A spark of joy that lit up the long days, especially in a home so far away from everything familiar. It gave Oren something to dream about, and it gave me a small, beautiful glimpse of what unconditional trust looked like in a 5-year-old's heart. Every morning he'd ask, "Do you think Uncle Merrick has picked out my suit yet?" And every night he'd fall asleep, whispering ideas for what color the ring should be, or if he could carry a flower too. He talked about the wedding the way some kids talk about Christmas, with reverence, with hope, with this sense of inevitable magic. I never expected it to matter. Not like this. Fast forward to this year. I found out from my mom, not Merrick, that he had proposed to his girlfriend, Sable. The news dropped casually in a phone call, like any other update, and I had to take a moment to process it. I wasn't hurt at first. Surprised, sure, but not hurt. We'd always had a slightly lopsided communication rhythm, Merrick and I, but still, something in me sagged when I realized I hadn't been told directly. I called him later that evening. I congratulated him sincerely. I meant it. Despite everything, I was happy for him. And then I told him how excited Oren was, that Oren had been dreaming of this moment for months, clinging to it like a lighthouse in fog. Ever since that sunny afternoon in Mom's backyard, the idea of being Merrick's ring bearer had been a kind of North Star for him. He would bring it up during dinner, mid-spoonful, his eyes wide and shining. "Do you think Uncle Merrick will clap when I walk?" he'd ask. He talked about flower petals and pillow colors, asked if we could practice with real rings someday. He treated it like a job he had to train for, and he was determined to get it right. One morning, I caught him whispering to Jules about how he would carry the rings and everyone would look at him and smile. "But I'll keep a straight face," he added, dead serious. "It's important to be calm." His excitement was pure and persistent. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was steady, constant. The kind of quiet anticipation that builds slowly, like a heartbeat, and settles into a child's sense of identity. Being Merrick's ring bearer wasn't just something he wanted to do. It was something he felt chosen for. "He's been talking about being your ring bearer since last summer," I said. He told Jules like he was announcing a royal title. There was a pause. Not long, but dense. A pause filled with the sound of something slipping away. Merrick cleared his throat. "Yeah. About that? Sable and I are doing a child-free wedding. She's pretty firm about it." I blinked, then let silence stretch between us. My brain scrambled to catch up with my heart. It didn't compute. Not right away. "So, he can't be the ring bearer?" "I don't think so, Ronan. I mean, we talked about it, and Sable's really set on the vibe we're going for." But it wasn't just about Oren. It was about trust, about words and what they mean, about how easily adults forget that children don't let go of promises just because the grown-ups do. I remember nodding, a mechanical reaction. I even said something like, I get it, but inside I didn't. Not really. Because my mind was already flipping through images of Oren's drawings, his rehearsals, his bedtime whispers about suits and rings. I felt the weight of all those moments pressing down on my chest. I hung up and stared at the wall for a while. You know that feeling when something so small, so seemingly trivial slices straight through you? When something that once felt light suddenly becomes unbearably heavy? That was sitting on the couch in our dim living room, staring at the shadows and thinking, how am I going to tell him? Now everything was tangled. Something tightened inside me. Not rage. No, something colder. A stillness. A quiet hurt that sank into my bones. Merrick had made a promise, and worse than breaking it, he seemed to think it didn't matter, that it was disposed. If that had been the only issue, maybe we could have worked through it. But our life overseas complicated everything. We had been planning to come home not just for the wedding, but for a month-long visit, to reconnect, to be present, with family, with him. Option 1, bring the kids, find someone we barely know to watch them during the wedding, and hope for the best. Stressful, risky. Option 2, leave the kids behind with a trusted friend, fly in for the wedding, then fly home again, and back once more, for the extended visit. Exhausting. Expensive. Logistically and emotionally brutal. Option 3, don't go. At all. None of it felt right. None of it felt fair. He didn't take that well. So I called Merrick again. I laid it out calmly. Clearly, I wasn't demanding anything. I wasn't trying to make him change their wedding plans. I just needed him to see where we stood. The reality. And I asked him, honestly, if he wanted us there, then maybe he should be the one to tell Oren, because that promise wasn't mine to break. You're making me choose between my wedding and your kids' feelings, he snapped. That's not fair. I took a deep breath. I told him I wasn't making him choose. He already had. All I was doing was asking him to take responsibility for that choice. Then he hung up. But a few days later, he called again. This time, his tone was lighter, like nothing had happened. He said he'd been thinking about it, and that maybe I was making too big a deal out of the whole thing. That Oren was just 5, and he'd forget in a week or two. Kids bounce back fast, he said. He'll be upset, sure, but I'll get him something nice. A toy or something. Maybe one of those superhero sets he likes. He'll forgive me. Something in me snapped. You think this is about a toy? I asked. My voice was low, shaking. You think you can patch up a broken promise with a plastic action figure? Merrick scoffed. I'm trying to find a solution here, Ronan. Sable's not changing her mind. We agreed, no kids. I can't undo that. Then maybe, I said. You shouldn't have made the promise in the first place. It was a joke. It wasn't a joke to him. I snapped. You spent a year encouraging it. You called him Best Man Jr. You gave him a bow tie. You let him believe he had a place beside you on your biggest day. And now that it's inconvenient, you expect him to smile through the letdown, like it's nothing. You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, I said, my voice rising, despite myself. What's out of proportion is the fact that your fiancé thinks it's reasonable to exclude family, and you're backing her up instead of standing up for your own nephew. What's out of proportion is how little you seem to care that the kid who worships you is going to cry himself to sleep over this. There was a long silence on the line, and then Merrick, cold and clipped, said, I'm not going to argue with you over a 5-year-old's feelings. That was the last thing he said before he hung up. That was 2 weeks ago. We haven't talked since. And now, I'm sitting here looking at a hand-drawn invitation, made with crayon and glitter, addressed to Uncle Merrick's wedding, in shaky letters. I haven't had the heart to tell him yet. I don't even know how. The silence from Merrick weighs heavier every day. I keep waiting for him to call back to say he understands, but nothing comes. And with each day that passes, it feels less like a wedding I'll miss and more like a brother I'm losing. I spoke to my mom a few days ago. She tried to mediate, as mothers do, but it quickly became clear that Merrick had painted me as dramatic. He told her I overreacted, that it was just a wedding, that kids bounce back, that I was being selfish. I wanted to scream, not out of anger but frustration, a deep, bone-level ache that I couldn't translate into words. I hung up the phone and sat there in the kitchen, staring out at nothing, the sound of the fridge humming like static in my ears. Part of me wondered if he was right, if maybe I was letting this get too big, if I had wrapped my son's hopes so tightly in my own longing for connection that I couldn't see the bigger picture. But the more I sat with it, the more I knew that wasn't true. This wasn't about me being overprotective or overly emotional. This was about a promise, a bond. I turned the idea over in my mind, 100 different ways. like a stone in my pocket I couldn't stop touching. Was I asking too much by expecting Merrick to mean what he said? Was I being naive to think that adults should honor their words to children the same way they do with one another? Every memory of Oren's preparations replayed in my head. The drawings, the pillow walks, the whispered bedtime hopes. Every small act that Merrick had once encouraged now echoed with silence. It wasn't just disappointment I felt. It was grief for the kind of relationship I thought my brother and son were building, grief for the family closeness I was always trying to stitch together across time zones and distances, grief for how quickly something sacred could be dismissed as small. The ache in my chest wasn't from the words. It was from the realization that he really didn't see it. He didn't see Oren's hurt. He didn't see mine. And maybe he never. And that's what kept me up at night, the echo of being unseen. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what it meant that someone who once knew me better than anyone could so completely dismiss something that had become a cornerstone of my child's world. Was it really that easy for him to erase a connection, to rewrite the past as a misunderstanding, a joke, a throwaway line? My mind spun in quiet loops. I kept asking myself whether I was letting emotion cloud my reason, or if this was the one time I was finally seeing things clearly. Was I overreacting, as Merrick said, or was this exactly the problem? That for too long I had let things slide, that I had excused little hurts for the sake of peace, that I had played the role of the understanding brother even when I felt anything but understood. It wasn't just grief. It was self-doubt. It was second-guessing every decision, every word, every memory. It was the weight of knowing I couldn't fix this without bending myself in ways I wasn't sure I could anymore. And all the while Oren was still drawing wedding invitations, still practicing, still believing. The pain wasn't just about what Merrick did, it was about what I would have to do next. Yesterday, I found Oren standing in the hallway with his tiny suitcase, filled with socks and a superhero cape. There was also a small comb, his favorite dinosaur figure, and a scribbled list he'd written in crayon, titled Things to Bring to Merrick's Wedding. It included nice shoes, special rock from the park, ring pillow, ask daddy, and jewels if he's not too loud. He had dressed himself in his best shirt, the one with tiny airplanes, and mismatched shoes, one of which was on the wrong foot. His hair was combed in the front and sticking up wildly in the back. His face was serious, focused, proud. When I asked what he was doing, he didn't hesitate. Getting ready for Merrick's wedding, he said. I want to be early so I don't miss my part. I felt my throat close up. My knees hit the floor before I even knew I was kneeling. I just knelt down and hugged him, long and tight. Later that night, after the boys went to bed, I pulled out my phone. I opened a blank text to Merrick, then deleted it, then opened it again. What could I even say at this point? The next morning, I got a message from him. It just said, I hope you're not punishing me for something this small. Small. That word clanged in my head like a dropped pan, like a slap, but colder. As if it were a footnote in his life, barely worth a second glance. As if Oren's joy, the time he spent practicing, dreaming, preparing, was insignificant. As if my child's heartbreak was just background noise. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my breath shallow. 100 different responses flashed through my mind. I imagined writing back, this is small to you because it costs you nothing, or it's only small because you've decided not to carry the weight of it. But in the end, I didn't reply, because I knew he wouldn't hear me. Instead, I sat down and started writing everything you've just read. Not to make sense of it, there's no logic that dulls this kind of pain, but to give it shape, to get it out of me, just long enough to breathe again. Because maybe I am being too sensitive. Or maybe this is exactly why we fall apart. One small silence at a time. A few days later, I sat Oren down. He had just finished taping another one of his practice walks, slowly pacing across our apartment, with a plush pillow balanced in his little hands, serious as a monk. I told him I needed to talk. He climbed into my lap, his legs dangling off the side of the chair. I tried to speak, but my throat caught. So I started with the truth. Uncle Merrick and Sable decided to have a wedding without kids, I said carefully. His eyes didn't register it at first. But I'm not just a kid, he said. I'm the ring bearer. I nodded. I know. I remember what he said. But sometimes, grown-ups change plans. And, sometimes, they forget how much their words matter. He stared at me. Then he looked down at his hands. So I don't get to go? I swallowed. No, sweetheart. Not this time. He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones. Then his face crumpled. Not into a tantrum, not a scream. It was the silent heartbreak of someone who truly doesn't understand why love can hurt like this. He cried into my shirt, his little hands clutching the fabric like it was the only thing keeping him from breaking apart completely. And all I could do was hold him. That night, he refused to eat dinner. He drew a picture of himself standing outside a church, looking through the window. He handed it to me without a word, then climbed into bed and turned his face to the wall. I sat by his bedside for a long time, watching him breathe. At one point, I thought he had fallen asleep, but then I heard a soft, broken sniffle, the kind that catches in your throat when you're trying not to cry out loud. He rolled over slightly, still facing the wall, and I saw that he was clutching the drawing he'd made earlier. Moments later, he sat up, his little shoulders trembling, and in a sudden burst of frustration, he tore the picture down the middle. Then again, and again, tiny scraps fluttered to the floor like wilted petals. "It doesn't matter," he whispered, his voice cracking. "No one wants me there." He lay back down, sobbing so hard it sounded like it hurt. That hiccuping kind of heartbreak that only kids and the deeply wounded know. He cried until the sobs faded into shallow breaths and sleep took him. But even then, he twitched and whimpered like his pain had followed him into his dreams. And I sat there, unable to do anything but run a hand gently over his hair, the guilt and helplessness pooling in my chest like something too heavy to move. I wish I could say I found the right words. I didn't, but I was there. Sometimes presence is the only comfort we have. We didn't go to the wedding. That decision didn't come easy. My husband and I argued about it, more than once. He saw it differently. To him, it was an unfortunate situation, yes, but not one worth burning bridges over. Merrick wasn't just my brother to him. He was a professional contact, someone tied into a few of his company's partnerships, back home. He was frustrated, trying to keep his tone even, but it cracked more than once. "It's not like Oren will remember this when he's older," he said one night, after the kids had gone to sleep. "He'll be upset, sure, but he'll move on. This wedding isn't just personal for me, it's business too. It's 1 week. We find a sitter, we go, we make it work." I shook my head. We don't have anyone I trust enough to leave them with. And even if we did, how do I look Oren in the eye and say we're going to the party he's been preparing for, dreaming about, without him? He sighed and leaned back on the couch, running a hand through his hair. "I just don't think we should blow up our relationships or your family over a misunderstanding. Merrick was wrong, but he's still your brother. Don't punish the rest of us because he made a mistake." "This isn't about punishment," I said quietly. "It's about trust, safety, and showing our son that his feelings matter, that we don't leave him behind for something he thought he was part of." Eventually, we agreed. We wouldn't go. We went to bed that night without a resolution. The next morning, I walked past Oren's suitcase still by the door, untouched, hopeful. I didn't say anything. Neither did he, but that image stayed with me. The days that followed were full of cold silences, muted dinners, that aching feeling of being together in the same room but on opposite sides of something too wide to cross. But I didn't see it that way. And I knew what he meant. He meant you chose pride over peace. But the tension didn't disappear. He didn't forgive the decision. Not fully. He kept bringing it up in small, pointed comments. "You know, Merrick reached out to the company again this week. It's awkward now. Or, if we'd gone, maybe things wouldn't be so strained. I chose our son. And maybe I shouldn't have done it. I chose to show him that broken promises have weight, that we don't let people who love us get hurt and then pretend it's small." But one night, after putting Oren to bed and staring too long at that empty doorway where his suitcase used to be, I logged into the private photo album we had shared with family over the years, the one Merrick still had access to. Not with anger, just quiet, and I removed him. No hashtags, no names, just that. Then I posted a new photo. It was Oren in his airplane shirt, holding the ring pillow with the kind of pride that breaks your heart. His face was glowing, mid-rehearsal, his whole little world still intact. I captioned it simply, "For the wedding that meant the world to him, even if it didn't to everyone."